V2 PTE Academic. We are providing online PTE coaching and monthly practice test. You can also stay connected with us. Facebook, Instagram and Telegram. For more information visit our WhatsApp on given number. Subscribe our YouTube channel and press the bell icon for more updates.
In today's lecture, I'm going to talk about changes in air pollution since the middle of the last century and what has created these changes. So, by the 1950s, air pollution was very visible, with frequent thick black fogs known as smogs in many large cities around the world. The main source of this pollution was from factories, and it caused severe health problems. For example, a particularly severe smog in London in 1952 caused over 4,000 deaths. Obviously, something had to be done, and in 1956, a Clean Air Act was introduced in Britain. This addressed the pollution from factories, and the smog soon disappeared. However, as you know, these days air pollution is still a big issue. The main difference between now and the 1950s is that you can't see it, it's invisible. Also, the main source of pollution now is from cars and lorries, and although these don't produce visible signs, this air pollution is still a significant risk to health. And one of the key factors in the rise of this type of pollution is that we have all become much more vehicle dependent. There are far more cars and lorries, trains and planes than in the 1950s, and this is now the main source of air pollution around the world.
From reading philosophy, I came up with 3 principles as the guiding principles for a just city. The principles of equity, democracy, and diversity. These were derived from the works of a number of philosophers, most preeminently, I suppose, John Rawls. My choice of the word equity rather than equality is in fact based on Rawls's argument that a policy ought to distribute benefits to people where the worst off become better off. So the worst off don't have to become equal to everybody else, but no policy should in fact make those who are most disadvantaged more disadvantaged. And it means that we have to talk about the policy at the time it's being enacted. To say, well, we have to make our city more competitive because sometime in the by and by, the benefits will trickle down to those people who are worst off. Doesn't justify making them worst off at the time. We have a lot of examples in the world of people whose homes were destroyed in the name of the greater good and said, well, eventually they will benefit. But equity means that you do not, in fact, take advantage of those people who are weakest.
There are four fundamental forces at work in the universe. Some of them are very familiar from everyday life, some of them are not. So we all know about gravity. That's one of the four forces. It's what keeps us anchored to the surface of the Earth, keeps the Earth in orbit around the sun. There's another force that we're all very familiar with, which is the electromagnetic force. That's the force that is responsible for electricity, electric currents, for light, for the sun's light. That's the electromagnetic radiation coming from the sun to the Earth. There are two other forces, though, that are somewhat less familiar, and they're the nuclear forces. They are forces that are at work within the nuclei of atoms. One of those forces is called the strong nuclear force. That really is a force that binds protons to protons, binds the quarks inside of the protons and neutrons, keeping them from flying out. The other nuclear force is called the weak nuclear force. And that's a force that predominantly we know of because it's responsible for radioactivity, radioactive decay. So those four forces, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force, those are the forces at work in the universe.
Now, as urban planners, what we really need to start considering is the amount of space allocated for residential areas within a city or town. And when I say space, I'm talking about space within a dwelling or home, rather than the actual size of residential areas. There's growing concern that the internal space of new homes is becoming far smaller, too small, in fact. Maybe you're thinking, is it important for residents to have sufficient space? Is it merely a preference to have more space, or are there more serious implications? Is there, in fact, any evidence to suggest cramped living conditions affect residents' physical or mental well-being or their day-to-day life? Well, research from a number of sources indicates that this is an important issue which needs addressing. Cramped conditions can lead to aggressive behavior, to family tensions, psychological anguish, and, in the more extreme cases, physical illness as well. Not only this, but there is a proven link between overcrowding and the social and emotional development of children, as well as their educational attainment. So, the main issue here is that residents require enough individual space to be able to live and function together, but with sufficient private space for personal time within the home.
indeed, the library. We've all been to a historic library. We've all enjoyed the smell of a historic library. But what is it and what does it mean? When at UCL Center for Sustainable Heritage, we've recently been asked to assess the environment at another historic library at St. Paul's Cathedral, the Wren Library, an incredible place. And it has such an intensive smell of old books. And we were also asked, for the first time really, I was actually quite taken aback by the brief, we were asked, whatever you do, please preserve the smell. It's so important to our audience. It's so important how people perceive the library. So that was quite an important message in our research. And indeed, smell is an important way of how we communicate with the environment. This piece of research was done by an advertising company, because advertisers are so interested in how we interact with each other and the environment. And we see that the majority of people use sight, obviously, to interact with the environment. But on the second place, we see that smell is also very, very important.